Hey you guys, it's me again. I am so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're still watching. I have lost track of how many episodes we've done now. I don't know, this is like 6 or 7. So I'm excited. People have responded really well and are actually really enjoying this totally silly thing, and I'm so glad. This episode is dedicated to Lucy and Lyla and Leo V. We'll just call him V. I don't know if we want to get super specific with their last name. They know who they are, and they brought some books. It's actually Lucy's birthday today, and they brought by some books that they wanted me to read to them. So this episode is dedicated to those cute little kiddos that I want to squish so hard on, but we can't yet. That someday I'll be able to love on you again. I'm so excited. Okay, so this one first is called The 7 Silly Eaters. And the author is Mary Ann Hoberman. And the illustrator, remember, illustrator is the one who writes or does the pictures, is Marla Frazee, is how I'm gonna say her name. All right. There is one page missing in this book, so we're gonna improvise, or it's gonna be awesome still. All right, here we go. Not so long ago, they say, a mother lived just like today. Mrs. Peters was her name. Her little boy was named the same. Now, Peter was a perfect son in every way, except for one. I haven't figured out this yet. Here we go. Well, let's see, get down here a little bit. When Peter was just 1 year old, he did not like his milk served cold. He did not like his milk served hot. He liked it warm, and he would not drink it if he was not sure it was the proper temperature. But Mrs. Peters did not mind. She was a mother, sweet and kind. And when his milk spilled on the floor, she patiently prepared some more. She'd take the bottle from the shelf and chuckle softly to herself, "What a silly sort of eater is my darling baby Peter." And they're out there by the little water. There's 2 of them, and looks like another one's coming. When Peter had not yet turned 2, another baby sweet and new was born, dear Lucy, small and fair, with big blue eyes and curly hair. But long before this child was grown, she had opinions of her own, of what she'd eat and what she'd not. She hated milk, both cold and hot. And warm was worst of all. Instead, whenever Lucy dear was fed, she bellowed for pink lemonade, not from a can, oh no, homemade. But Mrs. Peters, here we go. Well, I'm trying to get that figured out. There we go. But Mrs. Peters did not mind. She squeezed each lemon to its rind, while mopping milk up from the floor and patiently preparing more. She'd take the lemons from the shelf and giggle softly to herself. What a silly pair of eaters are Lucy dear and Peter Peters. Funny little kiddos. Now Lucy grew and Peter grew till he was 3 and she was 2. And who was one? Why, little Jack, with eyes so brown and hair so black. A happy baby, never cross, but all he'd eat was applesauce. Peeling apples by the pound, Mrs. Peters faintly frowned. She'd take the apples from the shelf and murmur weakly to herself, what a silly bunch of eaters are Lucy, Jack, and Peter Peters. You see this one? All right. Peter, Lucy, and young Jack had another brother, Mac. Mac was charming, round, and plump, but if his oatmeal had a lump, Mac would dump it on the cat. Mrs. Peters hated that. But since she loved her children 4, she'd strain the oatmeal 2 times more. She'd take it from the pantry shelf and mumble sadly to herself, what a foolish group of eaters are all my precious little Peters. There we go. Before another year was through, who came along? Why, Mary Lou. She was darling, sweet and bright, and had a healthy appetite. That is, as long as she was fed soft and squishy homemade bread. Poor Mrs. Peters got no rest, but still she did her very best. She'd take the flour from the shelf and mutter feebly to herself, What a fussy bunch of eaters are all my lovely little Peters. A year rolled by, the children grew. They really are a splendid crew, sighed Mrs. Peters, pinning pins and diapering her brand new twins. Little sisters quick and smart, impossible to tell apart. But Flo liked poached eggs, Fran liked fried. If she mixed them up, they cried. Tired to the very bone, Mrs. Peters groaned and groaned. She'd take the eggs down from the shelf and whisper weakly to herself, "What persnickety young eaters are all my 7 little Peters?" Now time went by, as time will do, and as it passed, the children grew. The problem was that as they grew, their appetites kept growing too. But not their choice of what to eat. Each child continued to repeat they wanted what they'd had before. The trouble was, they wanted more. Look at those kiddos. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, this looks like my house. Just kidding. Oh, there she is. Let's see what happens. Oh my goodness, it's so much. It's so much. Creamy oatmeal, pots of it. Homemade bread and lots of it. Peeling apples by the peck. Mrs. Peters was a wreck. She wiped her brow and heaved a sigh. Another year was passing by. In fact, she realized with sorrow her birthday would arrive tomorrow. Drearily, she shook her head and wearily went up to bed. She thought the children had forgot her special day, but they had not. At crack of dawn, they all began to carry out their secret plan. Mrs. Peters would be fed a birthday breakfast in her bed, a breakfast made of all the foods that kept them in such happy moods. So while their weary mother slept, down the stairs the children crept, and from the cupboards and their shelves, happily they helped themselves. Carefully they chopped and stirred, preparing what they each preferred. But despite the pains they took, since nobody knew how to cook, to measure things or make them hot, the more they tried, the worse it got. How is this going to turn out? First, Mac's oatmeal turned out lumpy, which made poor Mac turn grim and grumpy. In fact, the lumps got him so cross he dumped them in Jack's applesauce. Now this bothered Jack so much he threw it in the dough of Mary Lou, who tossed the mismatch that made straight into Lucy's lemonade. And that put her in such a huff, she poured the icky sticky stuff into the double frying pan that held the eggs of Flo and Fran, who flung the hodgepodge on the spot into the milk in Peter's pot. You see it? But when they saw what they had done, they wished they never had begun. They'd hardly slept a wink that night, and still things hadn't turned out right. And even though they'd tried their best, it hadn't worked, and they were depressed. They'd be in trouble, too, unless they found some place to hide the mess. The oven seemed the perfect spot. They all forgot it still was hot. They stuck the pot inside, and then they all went back to bed again. Goodness. The clock struck 6, but on they slept. Meanwhile, their mother softly stepped down to the kitchen, smelled the smell. What could it be? She could not tell. It smelled so good she sniffed some more and opened up the oven door. She woke the children with her cries. They all came running in surprise. And in the kitchen what they found was Mrs. Peters dancing round. And in the oven, no mistake, a pink and plump and perfect cake. Now, this is the page we're missing. And what is more, her wish came true, as birthday wishes always do. Did you see that? Look at that beautiful cake they made. And from that day And from that day to this 'tis said, the Peters family is all fed. A single simple meal, just one. A meal that's good for everyone. A meal on which they all agree, made from their secret recipe. They all take turns in mixing in. They all take turns in fixing it. It's thick to beat and quick to bake. It's fine to eat and fun to make. It's Mrs. Peters' birthday cake. Yay! If I was Mrs. Peters, I'd be so tired. I'd be so tired. Oh my goodness. All right. Our next book we have was another one from the same cute group of kiddos. This one is called Rosie Revere, Engineer. This one is by Andrea Beatty, and it's illustrated, remember, pictures coloring, by David Roberts. All right. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lyla Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer's stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. Oh my goodness. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. Look at his pants. Oh my gosh. Look at the hot dog dispenser. Oh my goodness, what she got now? The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head, from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps pythons away. Oh my goodness. All right, here we go. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred slapped his knees and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. I love it, Fred hooted. Oh, truly I do. But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept her dreams to herself. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked at buildings, airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad, She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dreams. That night as Rosie lay wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. Oh my goodness. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The Helio-Cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, oh no, never, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin or build with a lever or switch or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer. She turned round to leave, but then Great-Great-Aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close, and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next. Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. I failed, said dear Rosie. It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed. Yes, said her great aunt. It crashed. That is true. But first, it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. I like her. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next. She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear, to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. The end. 2 awesome books. I'm so thankful to Lucy and Lyla and Leo for letting me borrow their books. And I had an awesome time reading them to you, and I hope you enjoy them as well. I miss you guys. I love you guys. And please send me new books. Send me books you want to hear. I'll read them. I'm crazy like that. I'll do it. I'll see you guys. Bye.